Hey guys, Sean Little with Vapor Trail Tactical. Got to do a video series on reloading 308. So I'll go through my process and do the same thing like I did with the 5.56 match. This is 308 match, and I'll go through the process of how I load and my checks for safety. Alright, so I start off, I use pistol trays. These are 40 caliber pistol trays. They fit 308 real nice. And the first thing I do is I put them in the tray's head stamp up. And the reason why I do that is because these, I'm using all federal brass, and then, for instance, that little guy right there is not a federal brass. So I go through and do a quick check to make sure they're all federal. I've got one Hornady mixed in there. I'll pull that one out and replace them with a federal. Double checking to make sure nothing's damaged, nothing's missing. Didn't have any blown primers. This is all once fired factory ammunition, federal gold medal match. So I'm going to start with this, and then simply what I do is flip them in the trays using these two other trays. So, because I want the case mouths up, I'll just flip them, case mouths up. Do the same thing with this one here. Get them all in there. Now they're case mouth up. So this is 100 rounds. Alright, and again, we're using all federal brass. I don't want any other types of brass mixed in, because when we're talking about precision rifle and reloading, we want consistency. So if we have mixed brass and we get different pressure out of the different brass, and they're all spread throughout, then you're going to get inconsistent velocities. Properties of the different types of brass is not the same, so we want to be as consistent as we possibly can by having uniform brass and having the exact same kind of brass to work from. Doesn't really matter which one you pick. You can pick whichever you like, as long as it's all the same, so that you have consistency. Alright, so for 308, I work in 200 round batches. That's 4 trays, 50 each. And that's because my tumblers, I have 4 tumblers that'll hold 50 apiece. So that's 200 rounds that I could clean at one time. So my next step is to case lube. So have the RCBS case lube pad. I use their case lube stuff. So I typically just take a little streak down the middle here. So case lube is pretty important, and getting your case lube on the cases, a consistent amount of case lube on your cases is very important, because it changes the pressure when the cases go up into the die. Alright, so one of the things that I use is the Redding bushing die. I've had these dies for several years now, and the thing with the bushing die is that I'm controlling my neck tension via these little bushings, right? So I can put in different bushings. For example, for this federal brass, it typically likes the 336 bushing, so I can put the bushing in there, and I can control the neck tension on the bullet. Alright, so I get everything locked in, make sure it's secured. One of the bigger things with your dies is making sure that you get them seated on the press tight, so they don't move on you, they can come loose. Right now I am set to start sizing my brass. Neck brush with some lubricant on it, so I use the RCBS case lube. I put a little lubricant on this already has it on there, and I don't need a lot. I'm basically going to stab these. Alright, so I got the case necks lubed. I've rolled them on the pad. They've got just a little bit of lubricant on them. Run them up into the die. When they come out, and hopefully you can see that, where it size the neck, bump the shoulder back, and pops the primer out. So when I get them through the die, I simply turn them upside down back in my tray. Alright, so I get the first 20 sized, and what I'm going to do is going to check my necks to make sure that I have proper neck tension. So what I want is I want these to be at 335 or 336. These are at 336. So hopefully you can see that. So they're at 336 for that one. That one is a little below 336. You guys can see that. Just below, so just below 336. 335 and a half. But I'd like for them to be as plus or minus half a thousandths. That one's at 336. That one's at about 335-ish. About 5 1/4. So overall I'm getting some variance in my necks. The other check that I'm going to do is I'm going to do Headspace. Is make sure that the shoulders get pushed back a little bit. They should be getting pushed back about 4 thousandths. And what I use for this is I use the RCBS case mic. So that one's at 5 1/2. Hopefully you guys can see that, 5 1/2 thousandths. So anywhere between 4 and 6 thousandths is what I want. So I like the RCBS Precision Mic because it's pretty simple. You place it in there, you close it. So 0 headspace will be right here at 0 0. Hopefully you guys can see that. So 0 0. And what I want to do is bump the shoulder back. So if this was 0 0, this is the actual wall of my chamber. And what I'm doing is pushing the shoulder back 4 to 5 thousandths to make sure I give it enough room to expand in the chamber. So I want 4 to 5 thousandths, that's about 4 1/2. What I'll do is just go through and spot check these cases with the headspace gauge to make sure that I'm getting 4 thousandths worth of headspace at least. So if you don't have enough headspace, if you didn't push the shoulders back enough, that's where you get hard bolt lift sometimes. You may not have an over pressured round, you just have hard bolt lift because you didn't give your casing enough space to expand in the chamber. So I'm going to finish up all of these trays of sizing all these rounds. Once I get them sized and have them all complete, then they'll get cleaned. So to kind of recap on what I did, put the cases in the trays, double checked head stamps, flipped them over, ran them on the lube pad, got a little case lube in the neck, sizing them in the die, doing my checks of headspace and neck tension, and then I'm going to clean them. Alright, so finished up with the tumbling process. Already emptied the one containers. I'm going to empty these two and put them back in the trays. I'll get them dried out. I'll get them dried out with a hair dryer and let them dry overnight. Alright, so I've gotten the cases out of the case tumblers and they look really good. Very clean. See if you guys can see how well they came out. The tumblers, because they get the primer pockets fairly clean. There's a couple of them in there that are fairly dirty, but for the most part they come out really clean. So I did the hair dryer last night on the primer side, and then I'm going to flip them over and I'm going to do the hair dryer on the case mouth side. Yes, I used my wife's hair dryer. Alright, so done with the hair dryer. Let these cool off. Alright, so we're back in the loading room, and our next step is to trim and chamfer the overall length of the cases. So I've got our CBS case trimmer. I've got a three-way cutting head on here, so it trims the overall length. It does the inside chamfer and the outside chamfer, and this is running fairly consistent for me. So all I do is ram it in, lock it down, run the drill for a second, and I get a really nice chamfer. So hopefully you can see that. Does the outside and the inside. You can see that slight chamfer on the inside of the case mouth right there. And it trims my overall length 2.008, just under 10 thousandths. And that's my overall length. And it does a pretty good job, and it's nice and consistent. Once I trim them, I flip them over in the trays. That way I know they're done. So every time I complete a process, the case gets flipped, so I know that that process is complete. Get a close-up of this. How this locks in. It's pretty easy. It's a little tedious, but regardless of what system you use or manufacturer's product, you still got to do these one at a time, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to trim each and every one of them. And I'm only shaving about 4 thousandths off all these cases on average, 4 to 6. One of the other things that you may find when you're trimming cases is that if one of your, so dings, splits, cracks, is that whenever you go to trim your cases, is that you're going to feel that crack or that ding or that split. If it starts and it goes away, then it was probably insignificant. I still visually check it, but if I start and I finish the process and it's still, you can feel it hitting that mark or that ding or that split or that crack, you'll feel it hit, and you know that you need to discard that casing and replace it with a better one. Alright guys, so I found a blemish in the brass. You guys can see on the shoulder right there, right? A little ding. That's just a blemish in the brass. The way it was manufactured is just a blemish. It doesn't really affect anything. You don't have to worry about something like that. Now, if it was significantly caved in, like a significant portion of the shoulder is caved in, then you'd have to worry about that. But this small little blemish in the brass or ding or whatever that is, that's not a major concern. Something a lot bigger than that would be a concern. Alright, so I've got all my cases trimmed and chamfered, dried, and then I'm going to go into what I do for priming.